Third grade is a crucial year in the elementary sequence, as students are transitioning from learning to read to reading to learn, from reading short text with fluency to reading longer, more complex text with stamina. With only 570 days to prepare these intermediate readers for middle school, it is important that we provide a curriculum that is motivating and engaging while also giving them strategies that easily transfer to their own reading. Join me, Bethany Robinson, as I provide an overview of the CIA approach to literacy, a comprehensive comprehension curriculum that is innovative and research-based. We will use the RAND Reading Study Group report and meta-analyses of the research around comprehension to frame our discussion today. The RAND Reading Study Group report demonstrates the need to provide comprehension instruction that centers around the gradual release model, build background knowledge of genre and topic, build vocabulary, and teach a plan of action that readers can use in any text. Let's begin by looking at how CIA is designed around the gradual release model. The CIA Literacy Program offers a two-part program based on Lieben and Lieben's article, Both and Literacy Instruction, a Paradigm Shift for the Common Core ELA Classroom. Part 1 is Read-aloud, or shared reading, and defined by Lieben and Lieben as all students being given the opportunity to listen to fluent reading while following along in the text and reading in their head. This is accomplished in the CIA units of study, which are read-aloud units. Part 2 offers accountable independent reading, defined as engaged reading for all students with many of the following techniques: response journals, book talks, questions, and author studies. This is accomplished in the CIA Book Club units. The gradual release requires that students move from modeling to guidance to collaboration with peers and finally to independence when taking on new strategies. In the CIA curriculum, Part 1 Read-aloud focuses on the first two tiers of the gradual release triangle, model and guide, moving from the top down. In each read-aloud lesson, the teacher begins by thinking aloud, therefore modeling reading strategies. Next, the lesson moves to guided practice as students turn and talk with a partner while the teacher is close by. Part 2, Accountable Independent Reading or Book Club, is when students engage in the bottom half of the triangle and movement is from the base up. Book club lessons begin with a mini lesson followed by independent work time. When students struggle, they first go to a partner and collaborate. If their partner can't help them, they both sign up for a conference with the teacher, and the teacher will guide and model as needed. In this way, the CIA units fulfill the gradual release model and give all students an opportunity to practice strategies independently. The Common Core State Standards value read-aloud as a way to gain listening comprehension, as this graphic from the Common Core State Standards Appendix A demonstrates. Listening comprehension is ahead of reading comprehension up until about age 13, and is where students gain new knowledge and vocabulary that in fact leverages and accelerates reading comprehension. Lieben and Lieben indicate that students reading challenging texts during accountable independent reading with the scaffolds of read-aloud have been found to make accelerated growth in reading comprehension. Setting up your schedule for both read-aloud and accountable independent reading will accomplish this. We recommend that your daily schedule include 2 45-minute blocks of time, one for CIA Read-aloud and another for CIA Book Club or Accountable Independent Reading. During the Read-aloud block, you will have 10 minutes for the vocabulary routine and 35 minutes for the interactive Read-aloud. Please consider how you will set up your schedule to accomplish these goals. The RAND Reading Study Group also recognizes the importance of background knowledge. The more a student understands the genre and topic of what they are reading, the more fluently they will execute the text, the more deeply they will comprehend, and the more rapidly they will absorb new information and vocabulary.
Therefore, the CIA units are designed to sequentially build background knowledge. Each unit begins with students reading the blurb on the back of the book to gain critical information about the text and to infer the genre. When students read the blurb for Earthquake Terror, the first of 5 read-alouds for 5th grade, they will infer the genre realistic fiction adventure. They will use our genre posters to learn the predictable elements for the genre. In realistic fiction, the setting is believable and typically takes place in the present time. Characters are made up but realistic and will change over the course of the text. The plot deals with a real-life problem, and as the main character faces that challenge, the problem will change him or her. To discover the author's message, readers will have to pay close attention to this main character and the changes they are undergoing. Students not only learn details about the genre, but they will also engage in the topic over time. In Earthquake Terror, the main character, Jonathan, is on an island with his sister when a major earthquake happens. He has to learn how to survive in a disaster. Throughout the literary unit, readers will be asked to read additional outside articles about earthquakes, expanding their topic knowledge and vocabulary. These outside text lessons are scripted within the Read-aloud unit of study. As students also engage in the CIA book clubs or their own independent reading, they should be encouraged to continue to read about other natural disasters or survival stories to further grow their knowledge and leverage their reading growth. Please consider how intentionally focusing on genre and topic will leverage reading growth for your students. Vocabulary learning aids comprehension and deepens learning according to the RAND study. Therefore, any comprehension curriculum should place vocabulary learning and application at the core. When selecting vocabulary for explicit teaching within the CIA units, we specifically looked for the key repeated words that draw the reader to the theme or author's message. See, authors don't do anything by accident. Everything they do is very intentional to draw the reader to their message. In Peg Carrot's book, Earthquake Terror, she used key repeated synonyms to help us understand the change in Jonathan. Near the beginning of the book, words like responsible and capable come up over and over again to describe Jonathan. As the story continues, the author lays in key repeated words about nature, such as disastrous and destructive. As Jonathan continues to survive nature's fury, we start to see him change, and words like fear and despair start to pop up. If students pay attention to these key repeated words, they will understand this book is about survival. Once students can name the subject, survival, they will use the subject to get to the author's message or theme. They will simply ask themselves, what is the author trying to tell me about survival? In Earthquake Terror, you will find out the author's message is that nature is powerful enough to defeat man. While many books can have the same subject, each one will have a unique theme. These 3 books focus on the same subject as Earthquake Terror, survival. However, each one has a unique author's message. In I Survived Hurricane Katrina, for example, the author's message is that families have to work together to survive. In Hatchet, the main character, Brian, is all by himself, so obviously he can't work with others to survive. In this book, the message is that you have to think positive thoughts in order to survive. How will focusing on key repeated words draw readers to the author's message? Students will learn the meanings of these crucial key repeated words within the daily 10-minute vocabulary routine formatted around a vocabulary graphic organizer. Within this routine, students will predict word meanings based on the morphemes, prefix, suffix, and root, and the context clues. They will come up with what the word is to include synonyms and examples. They will demonstrate what the word isn't through antonyms and non-examples, and will connect to the broad world as well as their own lives. Let's watch a sample lesson from a 4th grade classroom.
3 word parts on it. Some of you might be already noticing there's a suffix. A suffix usually comes at the end of a word and it has meaning. Do we see a meaningful suffix on this word? Here it is, full. Let's put a box around the suffix full. When we take off the full, we see a word, deceit. So deceit and deceitful. There's also a prefix on the word, and we're going to circle it. Our prefix is D, D-E. Go ahead and circle our prefix D. And we have a root that comes from the Latin language, and that root is seat. So let's go ahead, we're going to label these prefix, root, and suffix. Nice job. Our suffix full means full of. So I'm going to write F-U-L over here, and I'm going to put an equal sign, equals full of. Seat is our root. I'm going to write it up here with an equal. And the meaning of seat means to ensnare. Ensnare is another word for trap. To ensnare or trap. Oops, I did that. And sometimes it also means to hide. And our prefix D, I'm going to write over here D-E, means completely. Okay, do you have that written down? Deceitful is an adjective, so it describes. So when we're thinking about this book, Castle in the Attic, deceitful is going to be a word that we use to describe someone in the book. So right here above what it is, let's put describes. Someone who. Describe someone who. I like the way some of you are working quickly to get this copied down for me. Describe someone who does what? Describe someone who ensnares or traps, right? So describe someone who ensnares or traps. You might already be thinking about, I wonder which character is going to be described as ensnaring or trapping. What else did we see that it means? Describe someone who hides. Okay, eyes up on the context clue. We're going to see if we're on the right track. We're going to read the context clue and see if we find a word that tells us we're on the right track for the meaning of this word. Go ahead and read it with me. On Saturday morning, William took the picture of Mrs. Phillips' husband and her mother's pearl circle pin and hid them in the shoebox that held his rock collection. Do we see a word that tells us we're on the right track? What? Show me. Some of you found it. Look, look, look. Do you see a word there that tells us we're thinking the right thing? Angelica? Hid. That's our context clue. Let's underline it. Hid. Now, some of you might be surprised. I am. I thought that this was not going to be, this was going to be a bad guy they were talking about. But who are they talking about here? The main character, William, right? So William is being deceitful. He's hiding things. Let's see if we can find another word in the second sentence that helps us understand deceitful. Read it with me. William lies when his mother asks him if he's seen Mrs. Phillips' things. Turn to your partner. What word did you pick out of there that might mean deceitful?
He lied to her mother.
Eyes up. Eyes up. What word, everybody?
Lies.
Oh, you're so smart. Let's underline it. Lies. We'll put it right here. So someone who is deceitful, ensnares or traps, hides and lies. Talk to your partner. How would you describe William here? What kind of a person is he being?
Taking things from. I have the word.
You had the word. Can you describe it a little bit? And maybe we can come up with that word you're looking for.
Kind of doesn't tell the truth.
Doesn't tell the truth. Good thinking. So you're thinking of the opposite of lying is truth. So someone who doesn't tell the truth is deceitful. Good. Eyes up here. Do we have another word that would help us understand deceitful? I'm going to show you something. Lizette has this nice pencil and I'd kind of like it, so I'm going to try something. Watch me. What am I doing? Am I sneaky? Do you think someone who's deceitful is sneaky?
Yes.
Okay, let's write it down. Okay. So let's come up with what it isn't. What's the opposite of trapping or ensnaring something?
Not giving, letting them free.
Everybody?
Giving it back.
Giving it back, letting it go, letting it free. Okay, I'm going to put the one I heard first, letting it free or letting it go. When I took Lisette's pencil, I hid it, right? What would be the opposite of hiding it?
Not showing.
Showing it?
Asking.
Another word for showing is reveal. To show or reveal. I know that Emily knows the next one because she was talking about it with her partner. What is the opposite of lies, Emily? Truth. Nice work. Tell your partner, what do you think the opposite of sneaky is? Tell your partner.
Askful. Polite. Polite. Askful. Honest with true. Lying.
Okay, tell me some of your ideas. Tell me some of your ideas. Let's get you back.
This is that.
Great. Okay, an idea here? The opposite of sneaky is?
Sneaky is acting politely.
Being polite. Do you like that idea? Yeah. Okay, other idea, Amber? Give it back. Anley?
Ask. Being honest.
Honest.
Asking if you can use that.
Who else used the word honest? Margaret, thank you. Okay, so let's use polite/honest. So that we get both of those ideas on there. Can you think of people in the news or things in the world where we see people being deceitful? Being sneaky, lying, hiding, trapping. Things you've seen on the news, right back
I
here.
heard my friends talking about a dog being shot in Paris, or someone being shot, and his dog got
I know.
So, do you think those terrorists were being deceitful, hiding, sneaky, doing some bad things? Okay. We have those terrorists in Paris were being deceitful.
Please consider how this daily routine will promote word learning for your students. While we recommend that the vocabulary routine happen at students' desks with the use of a document camera, as students move to the Read-aloud, they should assemble in a meeting area. A meeting area allows students to get away from the distractions of their desk and meet in an intimate and collaborative space. During Read-aloud, we want students to apply new vocabulary in the context of discussion. They will do this in partnerships as well as whole class. The meeting area allows students to participate in these collaborative discussions effectively. In this picture, you see 30 fifth graders in a meeting space. Students can sit on the floor, or as seen in this picture, you can create tiered seating with benches or chairs on the periphery. Students will need to bring a copy of the text, their composition book, and a pencil with them to the meeting area. They will be following along in the text as the teacher reads and copying notes in their notebooks. The teacher will also need some supplies. Teachers will need the teacher's guide and text, an easel, chart paper, and markers. Another important factor in establishing the collaborative discussions during Read-aloud is having clear turn and talk routines. We recommend that you set up intentional partnerships or trios to last the duration of one unit. When students have the same partner every day, management is smoother, and students can grow their thinking together across a text. When placing students in partnerships, consider communication level and comprehension ability. Avoid placing the highest and lowest students together, or the most outgoing and shy students together. Instead, pair students who are fairly close in comprehension and communication. Create a poster to remind students who their partner is. Color code these partnerships so that you can designate which partner begins the discussion each day. In this example, the red partner is the slightly higher partner from their blue partner. While students don't know who is higher and lower, this intentional color coding allows the teacher to make intentional moves during the lesson. During Turn and Talk, students are given a sentence stem to guide their thinking. This stem allows students who lack language the supports to get started. At the same time, the stem holds higher students accountable to deep thinking with evidence. Let's look at a sample stem. When the book said blank, I was thinking blank. This helps me understand blank. Each lesson will have a stem like this one to guide the lesson. When reading, the teacher will stop the first time to model. He or she will model thinking using this stem as scripted in the unit guide. The second time the teacher stops, students will be engaged in turn and talk. The slightly higher red partner will use the stem. Blue partners will be responsible for listening to their partner's thinking and responding with, "I agree with you because," or "I disagree with you because." The third time the teacher stops, the role will switch and the blue partner will be responsible to share their thinking using the stem while the red partner responds. Each lesson will have at least 2 turn and talks to ensure that every student gets to practice the teaching point. By setting up the turn and talk this way, students have a structure for language that scaffolds academic talk in the classroom. Refer to Raising the Standards for a list of stems, or consult the welcome pages in your unit guide to see the specific stems for your unit. Sentence stems should be posted in front of your meeting area so that all students can see the stems. In this example, you see the stem for the day in a pocket chart and the response stem permanently below. Notice the red and blue colored magnets on the right side. These allow the teacher to indicate which partner does the stem and the response. These can be moved quickly at the next turn and talk. The advantage of the pocket chart method is that stems can be stored in a stem box with tabs, allowing you to quickly pull specific stems for use in other content areas. Here is another example. In this example, you will see that the teacher uses her smartboard to post the stems. She created a slide for each day's stem and response. Students sit in the meeting area facing the easel and the screen. Colored dots are moved to show students which partner uses the stem and which partner uses the response. Let's watch a video of a CIA Read-aloud lesson. In this lesson, you will notice how the teacher connects to previous learning, introduces the teaching point and stem, begins the lesson with clear modeling, and engages students in turn and talk. This will be the design of every CIA Read-aloud lesson. In this particular video, students are engaged in our 6th grade unit, Children of the Dust Bowl.
Okay. Today when we read, we are going to be doing what John Steinbeck did. We are going to be feeling empathy for these people. You're going to practice. You're going to be putting yourself in the book and trying to feel what they felt and really see if you can experience what they would have experienced through reading this chapter, okay? This part is tough to read. It just practically makes you want to break down in tears to think about what they went through, okay? So you are going to be talking about your empathy for these people in this part of the text, and you're going to be using the stem. Eyes up. When the book said blank, I felt blank. Then the next part is where I want you to get to higher level thinking. This is helping me understand why you think it's important for you to feel how the characters are feeling. How does it help you understand the book? What can it help you understand about history? Okay? Alright, so I'll be modeling that for you today. Go ahead and open up. We're still in chapter 3. This time we're starting on, well, I want to go back a little bit. So open to page 25. This is what John Steinbeck wrote. He wrote, after seeing what the Okies' life was like, he wrote, "There is no work. First the gasoline gives out, and without gasoline a man cannot go to a job if he could get one. Then the food goes, and then it rains. With insufficient food, the children develop colds because the ground in the tents is wet. I talked to a man last week who lost 2 children in 10 days with pneumonia. His face was hard and fierce, and he didn't talk much." So when the book said that this man lost 2 children in 10 days, I felt like that would be the lowest point in your life if you lost 2 children like that. That you would be at your very lowest point. It's indescribable, right? So I'm thinking that for these Okies, life is so bad that anything, any small thing would make it better. I'm thinking they're not expecting anything huge. They just want to be fed. Or they just want to have a place to sleep at night. They just want one small thing to make their life better. That's how that's helping me understand that. During dead time, the Okies lived in the bottoms of dry lakes such as Kern Lake and Buena Park Lake in tents and shacks made out of cardboard and tin. Others lived on ditch banks, under bridges, and in fields of weed and rock. These squatter communities became known as Little Oklahomas and Okievilles, and the people who lived in them had no work and nothing to eat except boiled cabbage and cornbread. California was one of the richest agricultural states in the nation, yet Okie children are starving. The farms often produced more than could be picked or sold. So that means there was so much that they couldn't pick it fast enough, or they couldn't sell it fast enough. So that means there's extra, right? Extra food. But if the Okies tried to help themselves to the surplus crop, or the extra crop left on the ground, the growers might pour oil on the food, strike a match, and set the crop on fire, hoping the Okies would move on to another town. John Steinbeck saw this happen several times and called it the saddest, bitterest thing of all. So Reds, you start. How did you feel when you read that that extra food was set on fire or covered in oil?
Not the regular one. There's black soldiers. There's no conflict. There's no black bear. Black not I can see that. I have a rare
Actually, I have the best that I gave it.
I have the best. I have the best. Limited edition. What's it called? I agree.
While students practice language and vocabulary application orally during the read-aloud, students can transfer these stems into writing when engaged in independent reading or book club. In this example, we see how one of the students from the video used the same empathy stem during her independent reading of Out of the Dust by Karen Hess. When the book said that the father got drunk and spent all the money, I felt that the father felt guilty of Ma being burned, because he didn't have anything to say to Billy Joe. This helps me understand that when you lose a loved one, for some time you might do things that when you look back, you will regret. Please consider how the Turn-In Talks will lift the classroom discussion for all students and how they will promote academic discussions. And finally, the RAND study group found that readers need a plan of action to use consistently in any text. In the past, we have taught strategies in isolation, focusing on one strategy like predicting across a short text. With this method, the plan of action changes in each text. The RAND report indicates that we need to instead layer the strategies and teach a consistent plan of action across texts. The report did not provide such a specific plan of action, it just indicated the need for one. From here, we developed the unique CIA approach. Using the CIA approach, readers will divide their text into 4 relatively equal quadrants by taking the number of pages in a text and dividing by 4. For example, if your students are reading a 100-page chapter book, they will divide at pages 25, 50, 75, and the end of the book. If students go to put a sticky note in at the end of a quadrant and find the chapter ends 1 page later, they will just scoot the sticky note over to the end of the chapter. With the quadrants marked, students will use the CIA approach collect, interpret, apply to guide them through the thinking work needed for deep comprehension of the text. It is important because it alerts readers to the most important parts of the narrative plotline, therefore using text structure to define the plan of action. We know the narrative plotline to include the exposition, rising action, falling action, and resolution. When we divide the text into 4 relatively equal quadrants, we are alerted to the places in the text where the plotline shifts. 25% of the way through the text is the end of the exposition. The author has introduced the setting, important characters, and the central problem in the story. It is this problem that drives the plotline up into the rising action. If readers have not collected this critical information and cannot name the problem, they will struggle moving into the rising action. So in Quadrant 1, good readers will collect character, setting, problem, and important events. They will prove that they have these critical pieces of the plot in their head before they move on to Quadrant 2 by writing a retell summary. Once readers cross over into the rising action in Quadrant 2, they will begin to interpret the intentional craft of the author. They will look for key repeated words and phrases that draw the reader to the author's message. As they finish Quadrant 2, they will be halfway through the book and at the heart of the story. This is where the author's message starts to become visible to the reader. The checkpoint at the end of Quadrant 2 is to think about what the author's message might be. As students narrow in on a theory about the theme, which we call the line of thinking, they will select the theme that they have the most evidence for. This line of thinking will take them into the 3rd quadrant. In Quadrant 3, readers will continue to interpret the text. They will collect evidence to support their line of thinking and pay attention to the most important event in the text, the turning point. The turning point follows the climax of the story and is the place in the text where the plot makes the dramatic turn from almost straight up to almost straight down. This is the place where the author's message is revealed without a doubt. At the end of Quadrant 3, readers will write about the turning point and how it reveals the author's message. Once readers hit the final quadrant of the text, it is all downhill from here. Readers will read to the end of the book for enjoyment and after reading, will synthesize the text and apply the author's message to their own life. This will be in the form of a synthesis summary and evaluation writing. As readers move through a text, we mimic the momentum of real reading. The exposition moves slowly and is the hardest quadrant. Here readers will often reread as they gather an abundance of information about the plot. Reading speed picks up some in the suspense of the rising action, gaining speed even more so in Quadrant 3. And finally, readers read the fastest at the end when the falling action ties together the last of the missing pieces of the plot. Please consider how CIA shifts the focus from strategies in isolation to layered strategies focused around text structure. How does this allow for a consistent plan of action? Let's walk through each of the quadrants together using Earthquake Terror, the first unit for 5th grade, as our anchor text. We will talk about each of the lessons and the charting students will engage in to help you understand the design of the CIA units. In Quadrant 1, just as puzzle lovers look for the most obvious 4 corner pieces first, readers look for the most obvious information as they begin to read a chapter book. We know that these most critical pieces are character, setting, problem, and important events. In Quadrant 1, readers will create a character list to help them keep track of character names and important details about each character. In this example from Earthquake Terror, we see explicit details about Jonathan, such as he is 12 and likes baseball. While this text has just a few characters, a more complex text will likely have more characters to keep track of. Readers will also keep track of setting in Quadrant 1. Sometimes that will be in the form of a setting clues list, and other times it will be in the form of a map. In Earthquake Terror, the family is camping on an island in the off-season and are the only ones on the island. Students have to be able to visualize how isolated the family is, and so they will use clues about the setting to create a setting map. This map is revised as the setting changes due to the earthquake. Students will also focus on the problem in the story during Quadrant 1. In Earthquake Terror, as in most complex texts, there is more than one problem. The first occurs when the family walks from the camper to the lake and Mom breaks her ankle. Abby is disabled and it takes her a long time to walk using her walker. So when Mom needs to get back to the car so she can get to the hospital fast, it makes sense to leave Jonathan taking care of Abby on the island. Of course, we know what happens next. After Mom and Dad leave, a devastating earthquake happens. The bridge goes out, and Jonathan and Abby are stranded on the island trying desperately to survive. This problem will drive the rest of the plot. Next, readers will think about the important events that have happened so far in Quadrant 1 and keep reading while paying attention to additional important events. They will create an important events list in preparation for their end of Quadrant 1 checkpoint, the retell summary. As they finish Quadrant 1, readers will think about the critical information presented and write a retell summary of the first quadrant. The retell summary helps readers get the story in their head before reading on. It also allows the teacher to see if students have any misconceptions. Students will use a retell summary frame to guide the organization of their writing. This frame looks the same for all grades, so grade level teams will need to consult their standards and determine whether the assignment should be done in 1 paragraph, 3 paragraphs, or 5 paragraphs. Here is an example of a retell summary for Earthquake Terror. The first 4 chapters of Earthquake Terror by Peg Carrot tells about a disastrous earthquake. In the beginning, Jonathan's family is camping on Magpie Island when Mrs. Palmer breaks her ankle. Mr. Palmer took Mrs. Palmer to the hospital, leaving Jonathan taking care of Abby and Moose. Jonathan, Moose, and Abby started to hike to their camper when Moose acted strange. Jonathan heard a rumbling noise. The ground started to shake. The word flashed across Jonathan's brain. "Earthquake," Jonathan said, getting low to the ground. Jonathan grabbed Abby and laid under a tree fallen under another tree, leaving a gap. When the earthquake ended, Abby's walker has been broken. Jonathan led Abby to the trail. Jonathan felt a rumble. He and Abby got to the ground. It was an aftershock. Clearly, earthquakes are really bad disasters to be in. I wouldn't want to be in this dangerous disaster. Please consider how the work of Quadrant 1 supports comprehension. How does the work of Quadrant 1 prepare students for deeper thinking? In Quadrant 2, we move from collecting explicit information to interpreting the text. Think of this work as connecting the corners to build a puzzle frame. Readers will think about how the most important story elements interact. They also begin to look at subtle patterns in the text and use them to interpret the author's message. So in Quadrant 2, we look for key repeated words and author's craft to lead us to a theory about the theme, or a line of thinking. In Quadrant 2, we begin by narrowing in on the most important story element. When looking at our genre poster for realistic fiction, we see that the most important story element is character. So the author's message will be revealed through our main character, Jonathan. In Quadrant 2, readers will pay attention to Jonathan's actions, words, and feelings to infer character traits. In this example, students will notice when Jonathan thinks fast in an emergency and infer that he is dependable. Also, when he keeps going even when it is difficult, they will infer that he is determined. If you are unsure whether your students will come up with these words to describe Jonathan, don't worry. They will, because they are the vocabulary words pre-taught before the lesson in the 10-minute vocabulary routine. Additionally, students will focus on author's craft in Quadrant 2. Many types of craft come up across the units, with irony, repetition, humor, exaggeration, symbolism, and metaphor being just a few. In Earthquake Terror, Peg Carrot uses personification to make nature seem like a character in the book. When this becomes obvious, students will create a character traits chart for nature. As they recognize nature's actions, they will infer nature's traits. For example, when nature uprooted a giant tree, students infer that nature is powerful. When the earthquake caused the camper to get smashed, they infer that nature is destructive. When Jonathan and nature's charts are hung side by side, students will understand that Jonathan and nature are battling it out, and they will start to wonder if nature is going to win. This will naturally lead them to their line of thinking. At the end of Quadrant 2, a class discussion will lead students to a line of thinking. This line of thinking will be the focus of their discussions in Quadrant 3. The line of thinking for earthquake terror will be, nature is powerful enough to defeat man. Students will write this at the top of an evidence collection box, and together students will come up with any evidence they have so far to support it. This evidence will come from Quadrant 1 and 2. This is the only chart now that takes them into Quadrant 3. How does the work of Quadrant 2 move students into deeper thinking? In Quadrant 3, readers will continue to interpret the text, but will put the entire focus on finding the author's message. No longer is the reader working to figure it out. Rather, the reader works to see the whole picture. Readers will collect evidence to support their line of thinking and look for the turning point at the end of Quadrant 3. The checkpoint will be to write about the turning point and how it reveals the author's message. At this point in the text, it is very suspenseful. We are certainly moving up the rising action incline. Jonathan leaves Abby at the camper while he hikes back to the lake to leave an SOS in the sand. As he is walking, however, he notices water moving up his legs and discovers that the island is flooding. He rushes back to Abby, who can't swim, and begins trying to lift her up onto the roots of fallen trees to get her above the rising water. When that doesn't work, they resort to floating on logs as the water rises rapidly and they get caught in a current. The climax of the text is when they are being pushed through the current and then are separated. Abby's log is caught in a shallow tide pool, while Jonathan's log is quickly moving out to sea. At this point, we have no idea how this book is going to end. Then Jonathan decides to go for it and swim towards shore. At the very end of Quadrant 3, right where that third sticky note has been placed, a log hits Jonathan in the head and he is knocked unconscious. He floats briefly face down before he sinks. This is the turning point of the text because we know without a doubt Peg Herod's message. Nature has defeated the main character. Readers will be on the edge of their seats here, but we will ask them to stop and write about the turning point. They will name the turning point and how it reveals the author's message, using the turning point frame. Here is a student sample. I think the turning point of the book Earthquake Terror is when Jonathan is swimming toward the Pacific Ocean with his dog Moose, and he gets hit by a log and is drowning. This will change the plot because Jonathan could die. What will his parents do? Who will save Abby? I think the author's message is that nature is more powerful than man. Nature made a giant redwood fall on their camper. Nature made the island flood completely, and now Jonathan might die. This clearly proves that nature is much more powerful than man. I predict Jonathan will be saved by a fisherman. It is important here to stop and write because if they read on, they may be distracted by what happens next. You can breathe a sigh of relief because Moose the dog saves Jonathan's life. Whew! If students didn't stop at the turning point, they might think the central message of the book is, dogs can be heroes. But how much evidence would they have to prove it? Yeah, just one piece of evidence. Whereas if they had that nature was more powerful than man, they would have pages of evidence from across the entire text. In complex text, there will be more than one theme. However, the central theme will have ample evidence and will be revealed without a doubt at the turning point. Please consider what you have learned about the turning point and author's message. How will focusing on the turning point prepare students to draw conclusions about the author's message? Finally, in Quadrant 4, readers experience the joy of reading in the finish. As the story finishes, readers will apply the text to their own life and write a synthesis summary and evaluation. During Quadrant 4, students will experience a read-in, where the teacher reads all the way to the end of the book for enjoyment. There will be no assigned turn and talk on this day, but teachers will allow for discussion time as needed. The checkpoint at the end will be the synthesis summary and evaluation. Here is an example. Notice how the synthesis summary includes details from across the entire text, and these details have been selected to support the author's message. The book Earthquake Terror by Peg Carrot tells how the Palmers survive a disastrous earthquake. First, Jonathan and Abby are left on Magpie Island after Mrs. Palmer breaks her ankle. Next, a massive earthquake damages Northern California, leaving Jonathan and Abby stranded on the island, dependent on rescuers to save them. As if that isn't bad enough, the earthquake causes a flood to destroy the entire island. Jonathan and Abby have to work together to survive, and in the end, they're rescued. Peg Carrot makes it clear, nature is powerful enough to defeat man. And now for the evaluation. Here students will agree or disagree with the author's message using evidence from the outside articles read throughout the unit. In this book, Peg Carrot wants us to know that nature is strong enough to destroy man. In this book, nature destroys a bridge built by man as if eating a piece of cake. The forces of nature causes a huge camper being destroyed by a gigantic redwood. Clearly, you can see that nature is very powerful, that it can destroy man, but if it couldn't get any worse, nature defeats Jonathan himself. I agree with Peg Carrot because of the earthquake in Haiti. Forces of nature destroyed houses, buildings, and even injured and killed many people. I also read about an earthquake in Northern California. The earthquake caused 63 deaths and injured 3,757 people. Just because of forces of nature, it cost $11 billion to repair things. Clearly, nature is able to defeat man. Across the Earthquake Terror unit, students will engage in all Common Core standards for ELA. That is, all students taught over the course of 6 weeks. This work will be repeated 4 more times across the year and in different genres. Here is the scope and sequence for the 5th grade year. Please reflect on your learning. What are you most excited about for this school year? What do you anticipate students able to do by the end of 5 read-aloud units?